Welcome to the Inspiring Illustrations channel. The incredible story of Moses, the liberator of God's people. Bible stories. To understand the incredible story of Moses, we must first delve into the historical backdrop of ancient Egypt and the Israelites. Around the 13th century before Christ, Egypt was a powerful and prosperous civilization, known for its monumental architecture, advanced knowledge in various fields, and a complex social hierarchy. The Israelites, in contrast, were a Semitic people who had settled in Egypt during a time of famine, as recounted in the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. Over time, the Israelites grew in number and strength, which eventually led to their enslavement by the Egyptians. The Pharaoh, fearing their potential to ally with Egypt's enemies, imposed harsh labor and decreed the death of all newborn Hebrew boys to curb their population growth. This period of oppression set the stage for the emergence of Moses, a pivotal figure in the liberation of the Israelites. In this video, we will explore the extraordinary story of Moses, the liberator of God's people. We will uncover everything the Bible reveals about this remarkable figure, analyzing his entire trajectory from birth to his role as a leader and his significant impact on biblical history. Before we begin, I would like to extend a warm invitation to our new viewers. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to ensure you don't miss any of our in-depth Bible studies. The name Moses holds profound meaning and foreshadows his destiny. According to the biblical narrative, Moses was born to a Hebrew family during the time of Pharaoh's decree. To save him from certain death, his mother placed him in a basket and set it afloat on the Nile River. He was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, who named him Moses, meaning drawn out in Hebrew, because she drew him out of the water. This act of being drawn out not only saved Moses' life, but also symbolically represented his future role in drawing the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. His name serves as a constant reminder of his divine mission and the providence that guided his life from the very beginning. The key verse that encapsulates Moses' mission is found in Exodus chapter 3, verse 10. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people the Israelites out of Egypt. This verse occurs during Moses' encounter with God at the burning bush, a pivotal moment where he receives his divine commission. God reveals himself to Moses and instructs him to confront Pharaoh and demand the release of the Israelites. This verse highlights several important themes. Divine calling. Moses is chosen by God for a specific purpose, emphasizing the idea of divine selection and mission. Liberation. The primary goal is the liberation of the Israelites from bondage, reflecting God's concern for justice and freedom. Courage and obedience. Moses is called to act with courage and obedience, despite his initial reluctance and feelings of inadequacy. The oppression of the Israelites in Egypt serves as the backdrop for Moses' emergence as a leader. This period of hardship and suffering created the conditions necessary for God to demonstrate his power and faithfulness to his people through Moses. The story of Moses thus begins with a stark contrast between the oppressed Israelites and the mighty Egyptian empire, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic narratives of liberation in religious history. The Israelites, once welcomed in Egypt during the time of Joseph, had become a significant population within the Egyptian empire. As their numbers grew, the new Pharaoh, who did not know Joseph, perceived them as a threat. Fearing that the Israelites might ally with Egypt's enemies in times of war, Pharaoh decided to subjugate them through forced labor. The Israelites were compelled to build cities, work in the fields, and perform other grueling tasks under harsh conditions. This period of intense suffering and hardship is vividly described in the book of Exodus, highlighting the Israelites' desperate need for deliverance. Amidst this oppression, a decree was issued by Pharaoh that all newborn Hebrew boys were to be killed by being thrown into the Nile River. This decree was intended to curb the growth of the Israelite population and prevent any potential uprising. It was during this perilous time that Moses was born to Amram and Jochebed, members of the tribe of Levi. Recognizing the danger, Jochebed hid her newborn son for 3 months. When she could no longer conceal him, she crafted a basket made of papyrus, coated it with tar and pitch to make it waterproof, and placed the baby inside. She then set the basket adrift on the Nile, entrusting her son's fate to divine providence. In a remarkable turn of events, the basket was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter while she was bathing in the river. Moved by compassion, she decided to adopt the baby, despite knowing he was a Hebrew child. She named him Moses, meaning drawn out, because she drew him out of the water. This act of rescue not only saved Moses' life, but also set the stage for his future role as the liberator of the Israelites. Moses' early years were spent in the opulence of Pharaoh's palace, where he was raised as a prince of Egypt. This unique upbringing provided him with a privileged education and access to the highest echelons of Egyptian society. He was trained in the wisdom and knowledge of the Egyptians, which included subjects such as mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and leadership. This education would later prove invaluable in his mission to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Despite his royal upbringing, Moses never forgot his Hebrew roots. The Bible recounts that as he grew older, he became increasingly aware of the suffering of his people. This awareness eventually led to a pivotal moment in his life when he witnessed an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Hebrew slave. In a fit of righteous anger, Moses killed the Egyptian and buried his body in the sand. This act of defiance forced Moses to flee Egypt, as Pharaoh sought to kill him for his crime. The incident that led to his exile. Moses' journey to Midian began with a dramatic and life-changing incident. Despite his privileged upbringing in Pharaoh's palace, Moses was deeply troubled by the suffering of his fellow Hebrews. One day, while witnessing an Egyptian taskmaster brutally beating a Hebrew slave, Moses' sense of justice and anger overwhelmed him. In a moment of intense emotion, he struck and killed the Egyptian. Realizing the gravity of his actions, Moses buried the body in the sand, hoping to keep the incident hidden. However, the next day, Moses encountered 2 Hebrews fighting and attempted to intervene. One of them retorted, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" This response revealed that his deed was known, and soon Pharaoh heard of it and sought to kill Moses. Fearing for his life, Moses fled Egypt and journeyed to the land of Midian, leaving behind his royal life and the only home he had ever known. Upon arriving in Midian, Moses' life took a stark turn from the opulence of Pharaoh's palace to the simplicity of a shepherd's existence. He found refuge with Jethro, the priest of Midian, who welcomed him into his family. Moses began working as a shepherd, tending to Jethro's flocks. This period of his life was marked by humility and hard work, as he adapted to a new way of living far removed from the grandeur of Egypt. The life of a shepherd in the rugged terrain of Midian was challenging, but also provided Moses with time for reflection and growth. The solitude and simplicity of shepherding allowed him to develop qualities such as patience, resilience, and a deeper connection with the natural world. These years in the wilderness were a formative period for Moses, preparing him for the monumental task that lay ahead. During his time in Midian, Moses' life took another significant turn when he met Zipporah, one of Jethro's 7 daughters. Moses first encountered Zipporah and her sisters at a well, where he defended them from shepherds who were harassing them. Grateful for his help, Jethro invited Moses to stay with them, and eventually, Moses married Zipporah. Moses and Zipporah had 2 sons, Gershom and Eleazar. The name Gershom means a stranger there, reflecting Moses' sense of being a foreigner in a new land. Eliezer means my God is help, signifying Moses' recognition of God's providence and protection throughout his life. Fatherhood brought Moses a sense of stability and purpose, grounding him in his new life in Midian. God's call to Moses. The encounter at the burning bush is one of the most iconic moments in the Bible, marking the beginning of Moses' divine mission. While tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro near Mount Horeb, also known as the Mountain of God, Moses noticed a bush that was on fire but not consumed by the flames. Intrigued by this miraculous sight, he approached the bush to investigate. As he drew closer, God called out to him from within the bush, saying, "Moses, Moses." Moses responded, "Here I am." God instructed Moses to remove his sandals, for the place where he was standing was holy ground. This act of removing his sandals was a sign of reverence and respect for the divine presence. God then introduced himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, affirming his covenant relationship with the Israelites. He revealed that he had seen the misery of his people in Egypt and had heard their cries for help. God declared his intention to rescue the Israelites from their oppression and bring them to a land flowing with milk and honey. Despite the awe-inspiring nature of this encounter, Moses was hesitant to accept the mission God was giving him. He expressed his doubts and fears, questioning his own worthiness and ability to confront Pharaoh and lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses asked, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God's response was both reassuring and empowering. "I will be with you." He promised Moses that he would be with him every step of the way, providing the strength and guidance needed to fulfill this daunting task. Moses continued to express his concerns, worried about how the Israelites would respond to him and what he should say if they asked for God's name. In response, God provided Moses with signs to perform and assured him that the elders of Israel would listen to him. God also promised that he would perform wonders in Egypt, compelling Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. One of the most profound moments of the burning bush encounter is the revelation of God's name. When Moses asked what he should say to the Israelites if they inquired about God's name, God replied, "I am who I am." He instructed Moses to tell the Israelites, "I am has sent me to you." This name, often rendered as Yahweh in Hebrew, signifies God's eternal and self-existent nature. It conveys the idea that God is the ultimate being, unchanging and ever-present. The revelation of God's name was significant for several reasons. Divine authority. By revealing his name, God was asserting his supreme authority and power. The name I am encapsulates his sovereignty over all creation. Covenant relationship. The name Yahweh reinforced God's covenant relationship with the Israelites, reminding them of his promises to their ancestors. Reassurance. For Moses and the Israelites, knowing God's name provided reassurance of his presence and faithfulness. It was a reminder that God was with them and would fulfill his promises. Partnering with Aaron. After his transformative encounter with God at the burning bush, Moses was tasked with returning to Egypt to lead the Israelites out of bondage. Recognizing Moses' concerns about his speaking abilities and his fear of confronting Pharaoh, God appointed Aaron, Moses' older brother, to be his spokesperson. Aaron's role was to articulate the messages that God conveyed to Moses, ensuring clear communication with both the Israelites and Pharaoh. Aaron's partnership with Moses was significant for several reasons. Support and encouragement. Aaron provided Moses with the support and encouragement he needed to undertake such a monumental task. This partnership exemplifies the importance of collaboration and mutual support in achieving great goals. Complementary strengths. While Moses was chosen for his leadership and divine calling, Aaron's eloquence and ability to communicate effectively complemented Moses' strengths. Together, they formed a powerful team capable of confronting the challenges ahead. Symbol of unity. The collaboration between Moses and Aaron also symbolized unity among the Israelites. It demonstrated that leadership could be shared and that working together was essential for their collective liberation. Confronting Pharaoh. Upon their return to Egypt, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh to deliver God's command. "Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh's initial response was one of defiance and disbelief. He questioned the authority of the God of the Hebrews and refused to release the Israelites. This refusal set the stage for a series of confrontations between Moses, Aaron, and Pharaoh. Moses and Aaron performed signs and wonders as evidence of God's power, but Pharaoh's heart remained hardened. Each time Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go, God sent a plague upon Egypt. These plagues were not only demonstrations of divine power, but also judgments against the gods of Egypt, showcasing the supremacy of the God of Israel. The 10 plagues that struck Egypt were a series of devastating events that ultimately compelled Pharaoh to release the Israelites. Each plague targeted specific aspects of Egyptian life and their deities, progressively increasing in severity. Water turned to blood. The Nile River, the lifeblood of Egypt, was turned to blood, killing fish and making the water undrinkable. Frogs, swarms of frogs emerged from the Nile, invading homes and disrupting daily life. Gnats, dust turned into gnats, infesting people and animals. Flies, swarms of flies filled the land, causing widespread discomfort and disease. Livestock disease. A severe plague struck the livestock, killing horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, and goats. Boils. Painful boils afflicted the Egyptians and their animals. Hail. A devastating hailstorm destroyed crops and livestock in the fields. Locusts. Swarms of locusts consumed any remaining vegetation, leading to severe famine. Darkness. A thick darkness covered Egypt for 3 days, symbolizing the defeat of the sun god Ra. Death of the firstborn. The final and most severe plague was the death of all firstborn males in Egypt, from Pharaoh's household to the lowest servant, as well as the firstborn of the livestock. The 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, was the breaking point for Pharaoh. In his grief and desperation, he finally relented and allowed the Israelites to leave Egypt. This event is commemorated in the Jewish festival of Passover, which celebrates the Israelites' deliverance from slavery and God's protection during the final plague. The Exodus. The Passover is one of the most significant events in the story of the Exodus and in Jewish tradition. It marks the final plague that God inflicted upon Egypt, which ultimately led to the liberation of the Israelites. God instructed Moses to tell the Israelites to prepare for this night by sacrificing a lamb and marking their doorposts with its blood. This sign would protect them from the plague of the death of the firstborn, as the angel of death would pass over the houses marked with blood, sparing the firstborn of the Israelites. The instructions for the Passover meal were specific. The lamb was to be roasted and eaten with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. The Israelites were to eat in haste, with their loins girded, sandals on their feet, and staff in hand, ready to leave Egypt at a moment's notice. This meal, known as the Seder, is still celebrated by Jewish families today during the festival of Passover, commemorating their ancestors' deliverance from slavery. The Passover not only signifies physical liberation, but also spiritual redemption. It marks the beginning of the Israelites' journey to becoming a free people, bound by a covenant with God. The themes of sacrifice, protection, and readiness for change are central to the Passover story and resonate deeply with the values of faith and obedience. After the devastating 10th plague, Pharaoh finally relented and allowed the Israelites to leave Egypt. Led by Moses, they embarked on their journey towards the Promised Land. However, Pharaoh soon regretted his decision and pursued the Israelites with his army. The Israelites found themselves trapped between Pharaoh's advancing forces and the Red Sea, facing what seemed like certain destruction. In this moment of crisis, God instructed Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea. As he did so, a miraculous event occurred. The waters of the Red Sea parted, creating a dry path for the Israelites to cross. This extraordinary event is described in the book of Exodus, where the waters stood like walls on either side, allowing the entire nation to pass through safely. The crossing of the Red Sea is a powerful symbol of deliverance and divine intervention. It demonstrated God's power and faithfulness in protecting His people. For the Israelites, it was a transformative experience that solidified their faith and trust in God. This event is celebrated in Jewish tradition as a testament to God's ability to save and deliver His people from seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The pursuit and defeat of the Egyptian army. As the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, Pharaoh and his army pursued them into the parted waters. Once the Israelites had safely reached the other side, God instructed Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea once more. The waters returned to their place, engulfing the Egyptian chariots and horsemen. The entire army that had pursued the Israelites was swept away, ensuring their complete deliverance from Egyptian bondage. The defeat of the Egyptian army was a decisive moment in the Exodus narrative. It marked the end of the Israelites' enslavement and the beginning of their journey towards the Promised Land. This event also served as a powerful demonstration of God's justice and protection. The Israelites witnessed firsthand the downfall of their oppressors and the fulfillment of God's promise to deliver them. After the dramatic escape from Egypt and the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea, the Israelites began their long journey through the desert. This journey was not just a physical trek, but also a spiritual and communal test. One of the first challenges they faced was the lack of food. The Israelites, now free from slavery, found themselves in a barren desert with no immediate source of sustenance. Their initial reaction was to grumble and complain to Moses, expressing their fear of starvation. In response to their cries, God provided for their needs in a miraculous way. He sent manna, a type of bread from heaven, which appeared on the ground each morning like dew. The manna was described as white, similar to coriander seeds, and tasted like wafers made with honey. The Israelites were instructed to gather only as much as they needed for each day, except on the sixth day when they were to gather twice as much to prepare for the Sabbath, a day of rest. In addition to manna, God also provided quail in the evening. Large flocks of quail would cover the camp, providing meat for the Israelites. This dual provision of manna and quail demonstrated God's grace and faithfulness, ensuring that His people were sustained throughout their journey. It also served as a test of their obedience and trust in God's provision, as they had to follow specific instructions on how to gather and consume these resources. Another significant challenge the Israelites faced in the desert was the scarcity of water. At one point, they camped at a place called Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. Once again, the Israelites quarreled with Moses and expressed their fear and frustration, questioning why they had been brought out of Egypt only to die of thirst in the desert. In response to their desperate situation, God instructed Moses to take his staff and strike a rock at Horeb. When Moses did so, water gushed out of the rock, providing a plentiful supply for the people and their livestock. This miraculous provision of water from the rock was a powerful demonstration of God's ability to provide for His people even in the most dire circumstances. It also reinforced the importance of faith and trust in God's guidance and care. The incident at Rephidim is also significant because it highlights the recurring theme of testing and faith. The place was later named Massah, meaning testing, and Meribah, meaning quarreling, because the Israelites tested the Lord by questioning His presence and provision. This event serves as a reminder of the importance of maintaining faith and trust in God, even when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges. As the Israelites continued their journey through the desert, they encountered various hostile groups. One of the first and most notable confrontations was with the Amalekites, a nomadic tribe that attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. This battle was significant not only because it was one of the first military engagements for the newly freed Israelites, but also because it demonstrated the power of prayer and divine intervention. Moses instructed Joshua to choose men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Meanwhile, Moses, along with Aaron and Hur, went to the top of a hill overlooking the battlefield. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning, but whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites gained the upper hand. Seeing this, Aaron and Hur supported Moses by holding up his hands, one on each side, ensuring that his hands remained steady until sunset. As a result, Joshua and the Israelite army were able to defeat the Amalekites. This victory was attributed to God's intervention and the power of communal support and prayer. Moses built an altar and named it "The Lord is my banner," signifying that the victory was achieved through God's power and presence. The battle with the Amalekites underscored the importance of unity, faith, and reliance on God in overcoming adversities. The Theophany at Sinai. The journey of the Israelites through the desert led them to Mount Sinai, a place of profound significance in their history. It was here that they experienced a theophany, a direct encounter with the divine. According to the biblical narrative, the Israelites camped at the base of Mount Sinai, and Moses ascended the mountain to meet with God. This event is described in vivid detail in the book of Exodus, highlighting the awe-inspiring nature of God's presence. On the third day after their arrival, the mountain was enveloped in a thick cloud, accompanied by thunder, lightning, and the sound of a trumpet blast. The entire mountain trembled violently, and smoke billowed from it as if from a furnace. These dramatic manifestations signified the arrival of God on Mount Sinai. The Israelites were instructed to stay at a distance and not to approach the mountain, emphasizing the holiness and power of the divine presence. Moses acted as the mediator between God and the people. He ascended the mountain to receive God's instructions and then relayed them to the Israelites. This theophany was a pivotal moment, marking the establishment of a covenant between God and the Israelites. It underscored the seriousness of their relationship with God and the importance of adhering to His commandments. At Mount Sinai, God gave Moses the 10 Commandments, which would become the foundation of Israelite law and ethics. These commandments were inscribed on 2 tablets of stone and represented the core principles that would govern the lives of the Israelites. The 10 Commandments are as follows. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet. These commandments covered aspects of worship, personal conduct, and social justice. They were designed to create a just and moral society, reflecting God's holiness and righteousness. The giving of the law at Sinai was not just a legal event but a deeply spiritual one, as it established the Israelites as God's chosen people, bound by a covenant to live according to His will. In addition to the 10 Commandments, God provided Moses with further laws and instructions, known as the Book of the Covenant. These laws covered various aspects of daily life, including civil, criminal, and ceremonial regulations. They were intended to guide the Israelites in their interactions with one another and with God, ensuring that their community reflected the values of justice, mercy, and holiness. ___. Instructions for building the tabernacle. The instructions for building the tabernacle were given to Moses during his time on Mount Sinai. The tabernacle, also known as the tent of meeting, was to be a portable sanctuary where God would dwell among the Israelites during their journey through the wilderness. The detailed instructions for its construction are found in the book of Exodus, chapters 25 to 31. These instructions covered every aspect of the tabernacle, from its dimensions and materials to the specific items of furniture it would contain. God commanded that the tabernacle be constructed using the finest materials, including gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple and scarlet yarn, fine linen, goat hair, ram skins dyed red, and hides of sea cows. The structure itself was to be made of acacia wood, overlaid with gold. The tabernacle was divided into two main sections, the holy place and the most holy place, also known as the Holy of Holies. The holy place contained the table for the bread of the presence, the golden lampstand, and the altar of incense. The most holy place housed the Ark of the Covenant, which was covered by the mercy seat and flanked by two cherubim. The design of the tabernacle was highly symbolic, reflecting the holiness and majesty of God. Each element had specific significance, representing various aspects of the divine presence and the covenant relationship between God and the Israelites. The meticulous attention to detail in the construction of the tabernacle underscored the importance of worship and the reverence due to God. Alongside the instructions for the tabernacle, God also provided detailed guidelines for the establishment of the Levitical priesthood. The tribe of Levi was chosen to serve as priests and caretakers of the tabernacle. Aaron, the brother of Moses, was appointed as the first high priest, and his descendants were to serve as priests after him. The Levites were set apart for this sacred duty, and their role was to mediate between God and the people, performing sacrifices and rituals to atone for the sins of the Israelites. The consecration of the priests involved a series of elaborate ceremonies, including washing with water, dressing in sacred garments, and anointing with oil. The priestly garments were richly adorned and included the ephod, breastpiece, robe, tunic, turban, and sash. Each garment had specific symbolic meaning, representing the holiness and authority of the priestly office. The duties of the priests were extensive and included offering daily sacrifices, maintaining the sacred fire on the altar, and ensuring the proper conduct of worship within the tabernacle. The high priest had the unique responsibility of entering the most holy place once a year on the Day of Atonement to offer sacrifices for the sins of the people. This role underscored the seriousness of sin and the need for continual atonement and reconciliation with God. Once the tabernacle was completed according to God's instructions, a remarkable event occurred. The glory of God descended upon the tabernacle, filling it with His presence. This event is described in Exodus chapter 40, where it is said that the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses was unable to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. The descent of God's glory upon the tabernacle was a powerful affirmation of His presence among the Israelites. It signified that God had accepted their offerings and their efforts to build a dwelling place for Him. The cloud and the glory of God served as a visible reminder of His guidance and protection throughout their journey. Whenever the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out on their journey. When the cloud settled, they would camp. This manifestation of God's glory also foreshadowed the future indwelling of God's presence among His people, ultimately fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ and the coming of the Holy Spirit. The tabernacle, therefore, was not only a physical structure but also a profound symbol of God's desire to dwell with His people and to be intimately involved in their lives. Rebellion of Korah. One of the most significant challenges Moses faced during the Israelites' journey through the wilderness was the rebellion led by Korah. Korah, a Levite, along with Dathan, Abiram, On, and 250 well-known community leaders, challenged the leadership of Moses and Aaron. They accused Moses and Aaron of exalting themselves above the assembly of the Lord, arguing that the entire community was holy and that they should not have exclusive leadership roles. In response to this rebellion, Moses proposed a test to determine whom God had chosen to lead. Each of the 250 leaders, along with Aaron, was to take a censer and offer incense before the Lord. The next day, as the rebels gathered with their censers, the ground under Korah, Dathan, and Abiram split apart, swallowing them and their households. Fire from the Lord consumed the 250 men offering the incense. This dramatic judgment reaffirmed Moses and Aaron's divinely appointed leadership and served as a warning against rebellion. Another significant event during the wilderness journey was the incident of the bronze serpent. As the Israelites continued their journey, they grew impatient and spoke against God and Moses, complaining about the lack of food and water. In response to their complaints, God sent venomous snakes among them, and many Israelites were bitten and died. Realizing their sin, the people came to Moses and asked him to pray to the Lord to take the snakes away. God instructed Moses to make a bronze serpent and set it on a pole. Anyone who was bitten could look at the bronze serpent and live. Moses made the bronze serpent and placed it on a pole, and those who looked at it were healed. This event highlighted the themes of repentance, faith, and God's provision for healing and salvation. Balaam, a non-Israelite prophet, was another significant figure during the Israelites' wilderness journey. Balak, the king of Moab, feared the Israelites and sought Balaam's help to curse them. However, God intervened and instructed Balaam not to curse the Israelites because they were blessed. Despite Balak's repeated attempts to persuade Balaam, he could only speak the words that God put in his mouth. Balaam's prophecies included blessings for Israel and predictions of their future victories. One of his most famous prophecies is found in Numbers, chapter 24, verse 17. I see him but not now, I behold him but not near. A star will come out of Jacob, a scepter will rise out of Israel. This prophecy is often interpreted as a messianic prediction, foretelling the coming of a future ruler from Israel. Despite his initial obedience to God's instructions, Balaam later advised Balak on how to lead the Israelites into sin, resulting in a plague among the people. This duality in Balaam's character, being both a prophet and a source of temptation, highlights the complexities of human nature and the consequences of straying from God's commands. The 12 spies and their report. As the Israelites approached the Promised Land, Moses sent 12 spies, one from each tribe, to scout the land of Canaan. Their mission was to assess the land's fertility, the strength of its inhabitants, and the fortifications of their cities. After 40 days of exploration, the spies returned with a mixed report. They confirmed that the land was indeed flowing with milk and honey, bringing back a cluster of grapes so large that it took 2 men to carry it. However, 10 of the spies focused on the formidable obstacles, describing the inhabitants as giants and the cities as heavily fortified. They expressed doubt about the Israelites' ability to conquer the land, causing fear and despair among the people. In contrast, Joshua and Caleb, the remaining 2 spies, urged the Israelites to trust in God's promise and proceed with the conquest, confident that they could overcome the challenges with divine help. The negative report from the 10 spies led to widespread panic and rebellion among the Israelites. They lamented their situation and even considered returning to Egypt. This lack of faith and trust in God's promise resulted in severe consequences. God decreed that the current generation, except for Joshua and Caleb, would not enter the Promised Land. Instead, they would wander in the wilderness for 40 years until a new generation arose. The decree of 40 years of wandering was both a punishment and a period of preparation. During this time, the Israelites experienced numerous trials and lessons designed to shape their character and faith. The wilderness journey was marked by episodes of disobedience, repentance, and divine provision. Despite their hardships, God continued to guide and sustain them, providing manna, quail, and water from the rock. This period also served to strengthen the leadership of Moses and prepare Joshua for his future role as the leader who would finally bring the Israelites into the Promised Land. The 40 years of wandering were a time of refining and testing, ensuring that the new generation would be ready to fulfill God's covenant and establish a nation based on His laws and principles. As the 40 years of wandering drew to a close, the Israelites began to encounter opposition from neighboring kingdoms. Two significant victories during this time were over King Sihon of the Amorites and King Og of Bashan. These victories were crucial in boosting the morale of the Israelites and demonstrating God's continued support and power. King Sihon refused to allow the Israelites passage through his territory and attacked them. The Israelites, under God's guidance, defeated Sihon and took possession of his land. Similarly, King Og of Bashan came out to battle against the Israelites, but they were victorious once again, conquering his territory and cities. These victories were not only strategic in securing territory east of the Jordan River, but also served as a testament to God's faithfulness and the fulfillment of His promises. They provided the Israelites with tangible evidence of God's power and assurance as they prepared to enter the Promised Land. Appointing Joshua as successor. As Moses neared the end of his life, he took steps to ensure a smooth transition of leadership for the Israelites. Recognizing that he would not be able to lead the people into the Promised Land, Moses appointed Joshua as his successor. This decision was made under God's direction, who instructed Moses to lay his hands on Joshua, thereby commissioning him as the new leader. This act of laying on hands was a symbolic transfer of authority and responsibility. Joshua had been a faithful assistant to Moses and had proven his leadership abilities, particularly as one of the two spies who had brought back a positive report about the Promised Land. Moses publicly endorsed Joshua in front of the entire assembly of Israel, encouraging the people to follow him and assuring them that God would be with Joshua just as He had been with Moses. This transition was crucial for maintaining continuity and stability as the Israelites prepared to enter and conquer the Promised Land. Final instructions to the people. Before his death, Moses delivered a series of final speeches and instructions to the Israelites, which are recorded in the book of Deuteronomy. These speeches served as a summary of the laws and commandments that God had given to the Israelites and a reminder of their covenant with Him. Moses emphasized the importance of obedience to God's laws as the key to their success and prosperity in the Promised Land. Moses also warned the people about the dangers of idolatry and the consequences of turning away from God. He reminded them of the blessings that would come from faithfulness and the curses that would result from disobedience. Additionally, Moses recounted the history of their journey from Egypt, highlighting God's faithfulness and the lessons they had learned along the way. In his final address, Moses encouraged the Israelites to choose life by loving and obeying God. He urged them to remember the covenant and to teach it to their children, ensuring that future generations would continue to follow God's ways. These final instructions were intended to prepare the Israelites spiritually and morally for the challenges they would face in the Promised Land. After delivering his final instructions, Moses ascended Mount Nebo, from where he was granted a view of the Promised Land. From the summit, he could see the vast expanse of the land that God had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This moment was both poignant and bittersweet, as Moses was allowed to see the land but not enter it. According to the biblical narrative, God showed Moses the entire land, from Gilead to Dan, all of Naphtali, the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah as far as the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev, and the whole region from the valley of Jericho to Zor. This panoramic view was a fulfillment of God's promise and a testament to Moses' faith and leadership. Moses died on Mount Nebo at the age of 120, and God himself buried him in an unknown grave in the land of Moab. The Israelites mourned for Moses for 30 days, recognizing the end of an era and the loss of their great leader. Despite not entering the Promised Land, Moses' legacy endured through the laws he delivered and the leadership he provided. His role as lawgiver and prophet. Moses is revered as one of the greatest lawgivers and prophets in history. His role in delivering the Ten Commandments and the broader Mosaic Law established the foundation for Israelite society and religious practice. As a lawgiver, Moses provided a comprehensive legal and ethical framework that governed various aspects of life, including worship, civil conduct, and social justice. These laws were not merely rules but were seen as divine instructions that reflected God's will and character. As a prophet, Moses served as a mediator between God and the Israelites. He communicated God's messages, performed miracles, and led the people through significant events such as the Exodus and the journey through the wilderness. His prophetic role was characterized by his close relationship with God, often described as speaking with God face to face. This unique relationship underscored his authority and the divine origin of his teachings. Moses' impact on Israelite history is profound and enduring. He is credited with leading the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt, guiding them through the wilderness, and preparing them to enter the Promised Land. His leadership and the laws he delivered shaped the identity and destiny of the Israelite nation. The covenant established at Mount Sinai, with Moses as the mediator, became the cornerstone of Israelite religion and culture. Beyond the Israelite context, Moses' influence extends to world history and various religious traditions. In Judaism, he is considered the greatest prophet and teacher, and the Torah attributed to him is central to Jewish faith and practice. Christianity also holds Moses in high regard, recognizing his role in God's redemptive plan and viewing the Mosaic Law as a precursor to the teachings of Jesus Christ. Islam honors Moses, Musa, as a significant prophet who delivered God's guidance to the Israelites. Moses' legacy also permeates Western legal and ethical thought. The principles of justice, morality, and social responsibility found in the Mosaic Law have influenced legal systems and moral philosophies throughout history. His story of liberation and covenant continues to inspire movements for justice and human rights around the world. Moses is frequently referenced in the New Testament, highlighting his enduring significance in Christian theology. Jesus often referred to the law of Moses in his teachings, emphasizing its importance while also fulfilling and expanding upon it. For example, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus cites the commandments given through Moses and provides deeper interpretations that emphasize the spirit of the law. The New Testament also draws parallels between Moses and Jesus, portraying Jesus as a prophet like Moses but greater. In the book of Acts, Stephen's speech before the Sanhedrin recounts Moses' life and mission, drawing connections to Jesus' role as the ultimate deliverer. The Epistle to the Hebrews presents Moses as a faithful servant in God's house, but contrasts him with Jesus, who is described as the son and heir. Moses' role in the transfiguration of Jesus is another significant reference. In this event, Moses and Elijah appear alongside Jesus, symbolizing the fulfillment of the law and the prophets in Jesus' ministry. This moment underscores the continuity and culmination of God's redemptive plan through Jesus, with Moses representing the foundational covenant. Moses' life is a profound example of leadership grounded in faith. From his initial reluctance to accept God's call at the burning bush to his steadfast guidance of the Israelites through the wilderness, Moses demonstrated that true leadership often requires stepping out of one's comfort zone and trusting in a higher power. His faith in God's promises and his willingness to act on divine instructions, even in the face of immense challenges, highlight the importance of faith as a cornerstone of effective leadership. Moses' leadership was characterized by his ability to inspire and mobilize a diverse and often contentious group of people. He faced numerous rebellions and crises, yet he consistently turned to God for guidance and strength. This reliance on divine support underscores the lesson that leaders are most effective when they recognize their limitations and seek wisdom beyond their own understanding. Despite his significant achievements, Moses is often remembered for his humility. He is described in the Bible as very humble, more than anyone else on the face of the earth. This humility was evident in his willingness to serve others, his openness to correction, and his acknowledgement of his own weaknesses. Moses' humility allowed him to remain teachable and responsive to God's direction, qualities that are essential for any leader. Moses' perseverance is another key lesson from his life. Leading the Israelites through the wilderness for 40 years required immense patience and resilience. He faced constant complaints, rebellions, and setbacks, yet he remained committed to his mission. Moses' perseverance teaches us the importance of staying the course, even when the journey is long and difficult. It reminds us that true success often requires enduring hardship and remaining faithful to our goals and values. One of the most remarkable aspects of Moses' life was his intimate relationship with God. He spoke with God face to face, as one speaks to a friend. This deep communion with the divine was the source of Moses' strength, wisdom, and guidance. His regular encounters with God, whether on Mount Sinai or in the tent of meeting, highlight the importance of cultivating a close and personal relationship with the divine. Moses' intimacy with God also underscores the value of prayer and meditation. His life demonstrates that spiritual practices are not just rituals but vital means of connecting with God and receiving direction and support. This lesson encourages us to prioritize our spiritual lives and seek a deeper relationship with God, knowing that it can profoundly impact our ability to lead and navigate life's challenges. Conclusion: Moses in religious tradition. In Judaism, Moses is regarded as the greatest prophet and teacher who ever lived. Known as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher, he is credited with receiving the Torah from God, which includes the Ten Commandments and the broader Mosaic Law. These laws form the foundation of Jewish religious practice and ethical conduct. Moses' leadership in delivering the Israelites from slavery in Egypt and guiding them through the wilderness is central to Jewish identity and faith. His life and teachings are commemorated in various Jewish holidays, such as Passover, which celebrates the Exodus. Moses holds a significant place in Christian theology as well. He is seen as a precursor to Jesus Christ, with many parallels drawn between their lives and missions. For example, both Moses and Jesus were born under oppressive regimes, performed miracles, and delivered God's law to the people. In the New Testament, Jesus often refers to the law of Moses, emphasizing its importance while also fulfilling and expanding upon it. The Transfiguration of Jesus, where Moses appears alongside Elijah, symbolizes the fulfillment of the law and the prophets in Jesus' ministry. In Islam, Moses, known as Musa, is one of the most important prophets. He is mentioned frequently in the Quran, where his story is recounted in detail. Moses is revered for his role in leading the Israelites out of Egypt and receiving the divine revelation of the Torah. His life is seen as a model of faith, perseverance, and obedience to God. The Quran highlights Moses' struggles against Pharaoh, his miracles, and his guidance of the Israelites. His story serves as a source of inspiration and moral lessons for Muslims. The legacy of Moses across these religious traditions underscores the universal themes of faith, leadership, and moral integrity. His life teaches us the importance of standing up against oppression, trusting in divine guidance, and striving for justice and righteousness. Moses' example encourages us to lead with humility, persevere through challenges, and maintain a close relationship with the divine. In conclusion, Moses' impact on religious tradition is profound and far-reaching. His teachings and example continue to inspire and guide people of faith across different cultures and eras. As we reflect on his legacy, we can draw valuable lessons for our own lives, striving to live with integrity, faith, and a commitment to justice.